I'm interested in various themes. Actually, by profession, I'm a social anthropologist. As the Dutch say, Zeksploeser, a pensioner. I'm 69 years old. And I gather mushrooms in the summer. I have a song about this, but I won't sing the song about mushrooms. And this year, there were no mushrooms near Moscow. Why? Because there was drought. This year was drought. And not only in the Moscow region, but also almost dried the Thames, the English River, or the Rhine, or the Yenisei River, or some rivers in near Moscow. They all half dried. So there was very little rain. In August, in the Moscow region, there was absolutely no rain, and in September too, and all the brooks and rivers became half flowing, and the brooks dried up entirely. So why? When I couldn't find mushrooms, I constantly walking in the wood, I asked myself, why this drought? Why this drought? And in one club like that, I had a discussion with an engineer, and he said that the amount of rain must be the same on average in the vast territories, because if the rain doesn't fall in this place, it will fall in some other place, and the general amount of rain will be the same. And I thought about this thesis for 2 days, and I came to a conclusion that this is wrong, that the general amount of rain, let's say in northern hemisphere, may be different, and from which causes it depends. On what does it depend? On the rate of precipitation. And the rate of precipitation is connected with the temperature. If the temperature lowers, the amount of precipitation decreases. And so when we expect the rain from the west, from the Atlantic Ocean, so-called westerlies, they bring no rain this summer because there is very little, water in the air, in the gas form, I forgot, vapor. Very little water vapor in the air, because the Atlantic Ocean evaporates less rain when there is colder. And here is, I want to show the article of Valentina Zharkova. Valentina Zharkova sometimes speaks about this thing which is called, in English, Maunder minimum. But as a Russian, she pronounces as Maunder minimum. But the correct form is Maunder minimum. But the English can't pronounce the surname of Valentina Zharkova. They say Valentina Zarkova, because in English there is no Z. But such phoneme is present in Russian, for instance, or in Portuguese, or in French. So Valentina Zharkova. And what does she say? In this article, she came to a conclusion that the sun is the double dynamo machine. I wouldn't explain what is dynamo, but there is a magnetic field and currents in the sun of various origins and various vectors. And interaction between them creates the cycles. The general cycle is 11 years or 22 years. But Zharkova proved, or this is her theory, that there are cycles of the sunspot activity in duration of about 300 years. And the last such small sunspot activity was recorded in the 17th and 18th century, the Maunder minimum. Before that, there were other minimums, for instance, Homer minimum, BC, Oort minimum, but this was called Oort minimum, Wolf minimum, and another minimum which Spörer, which I wouldn't dwell upon, but Zharkova states that we are entering another sunspot minimum, sun activity minimum, which causes the drop in temperature by 1 degree on average during the year. So this is the reason for the lower evaporation, because in 2020 we entered the minimum, which will be very, very suffering for humanity, actually. Each such minimum brings some revolutionary changes in human society. But actually, in the Moscow region, there was additional month of winter. The March was as cold as winter. So the vegetation period became shorter by 1 month. And this is the reason why on the above the Atlantic Ocean there was less evaporation, because there was colder, and we are entering such period when there will be very little mushrooms in the woods. So I guess that if Valentina Zharkova is right, then we are going to have years of the drop of temperature by 1 degree per year.
That's not the worst thing.
That's not the worst, because the glacial period, during the glacial periods, last of them was about 18,000 years before, or 20,000 years before Christ. The drop was 5 degrees, which means that the glaciers were over England and Scandinavia. But by 1 degree, we have very good fiddles, because the circles in on the trunks of the trees became very narrow, which is very good for making fiddles. And so during the Stradivari period, they were making good fiddles. And this time comes back again and will last for until, I think, 2053. Well, I may be mistaken, but for several decades. And this is, I think, if Zharkova is right, then we are entering the regular period of small sunspot activity and relative drop in temperature. That's what I wanted to tell about the climate.